Hi, Budit. It's great.
Hello, Frank.
Great talking to you, and thanks again for doing this. I know the situation in the Philippines is pretty bad at the moment, so it's great you taking the time to talk to us.
Yes, thank you so much to you and TNI for making these interviews possible, and also to be able for us to be able to bring forward the situation in the Philippines, and also what various stakeholders around the world can do to help our situation. Thank you.
Yeah, so I want to ask you actually. I want to start to ask you about your personal situation. I know you've had issues with even getting back to the Philippines following a trip to Europe recently. You received threats from the government. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Well, actually, not exactly threats from the government, but you see, this administration has actually put in place very well oiled and very uh, efficient propaganda machinery. So when Duterte assumed office in June last year, they actually deployed propagandists um, here in the Philippines, as well as in various parts of the world where you have huge concentrations of Filipino migrants. You see, Filipino migrant workers are actually an important support base for this president because they are sort of decision makers in the family, no? Remitting dollars. So our economy is actually dependent on um, the um, the remittances of our overseas Filipino workers, no? And so it's important that his popularity is sustained there amongst Filipinos abroad also. This administration has also made full use of government's information and news agencies, no, to sustain this president's kill and anti-human rights rhetoric. So both online and offline, this propaganda machinery actually sustains that culture of bullying and lynch mob methods by those who provide active consensus to President Duterte's rule. No, so he took advantage of a very disoriented and frustrated public, and that is what enables him to operate on a still on a very strong support base. And yeah, the attacks that I've received, that also other human rights defenders receive here in the Philippines, is from this propaganda machinery, no, sanctioned by this government.
So, so the overall situation for human rights and environmental defenders in Mindanao and elsewhere is pretty terrible right now, right?
Yes, actually, the extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, and torture, the gravest forms of human rights violations, were there even before Duterte. Actually, as Professor Philip Alston, the former special rapporteur on extrajudicial killings, um, said during his visit to the Philippines that while the Philippines has undertaken admirable efforts towards the respect, protection, and fulfillment of human rights, there still is a strong undercurrent of lawlessness, meaning that the state itself has um, been making use of vigilante groups and non-state armed groups to yeah to stifle dissent and eliminate opposition. No? So of course the Philippines, I think, ranks number two the most hazardous for those protecting the environment, no? So environmental activists, and so that has been carried over. That has not stopped during the Duterte administration. The difference is that um, this government, President Duterte has put in place this permission structure for mass murder, and that's actually defined this particular section of Philippine society, drug dependents and petty drug peddlers, worthy of elimination. But also, while this impoverished sector is being attacked, he has also, together with the propaganda machinery I have mentioned, actually prepared public acceptance of a possible, um, yeah, attack of human rights defenders. So it's a very tensioning situation for all types of agents of change in the Philippines because he has defined human rights activists as the enemies of the state, as those who protect criminals and those who prevent development. So, with a huge chunk of the population being misled, being misinformed, there is actually, we are afraid, a permission for a total crackdown of all sorts of activists. And now, with the total breakdown of peace talks, with the big left looming, this actually, when this happens, this actually puts at risk um, all sorts of activists, no, all kinds of people working towards change in the Philippines, because the state machine will not uh, will not discriminate who is with the left or not. All of us will be seen as part of the big left. No, so this is a precarious situation for us at this point in time.
Yeah. You mentioned the support Duterte enjoys in the sort of overall population, and I was reading a poll of Philstar Global recently, which said that
Yes.
80% of the population was, had high trust in Duterte. How do you explain this? Is it only because of the propaganda, or how do you explain such support?
Just to start off, there's this survey released on October 8th by Pulse Asia that actually reveals a sharp decline in his popularity. No? Of course, he's still very much popular, as the survey revealed. Uh, but the survey also shows that a huge number of Filipinos actually um, do not trust, no, um, have doubts about the validity of the claims of the police that everybody they were engaging, arresting, fought back. So that means that the war on drugs popularity is losing traction, and yeah, uh, President Duterte's uh, popularity is slowly declining as well. His popularity is, as we perceive it, quite hyperinflated. No, and it's actually the efficiency of this propaganda machinery that bloats um, his popularity amongst the Filipinos. We believe that there is a huge silent majority because of the climate of fear that he has put in place. But to really explain why a significant number of Filipinos um, actually um, came to rely on President Duterte is because of the people's uh, frustration for 30 years. No, um, we should trace the problem back to the EDSA revolution in 1986, which promised radical social reforms, the equitable redistribution of the nation's wealth, um, and uh, and most importantly, the democratization of essential services and opportunities. These are actually requirements for all Filipinos to get out of poverty. But these promises never took place. And so the five regimes before Duterte actually never delivered um, essentially um, uh, the essentials of a life of dignity for everyone. And thus, it is the accumulated frustration of a people that actually, um, yeah, um, made them put their hopes on um, even this populist yet violent president, no? And a second reason would be that his cornerstone program, drugs and crime, the most affected by these issues are also the most impoverished sections of Philippine society. No, the poorest of the poor not being able to gate themselves up in private subdivisions or pay for private security. And essentially, um, that is why so many Filipinos disgruntled frustrated with an inoperable criminal justice system, actually have come to subscribe to this alternative justice dispensation system that this president is offering. No, so it's just like any other uh, a government policy that is good on paper, but in practice is inoperable. Filipinos are just willing um, to take on and accept the alternative and turn their heads around and just let it happen. No, it's important to let Filipinos know the importance of due process and the importance of the transparency and checks and balances that our still dysfunctional criminal justice system has to offer. It's really repairing this dysfunctional criminal justice system that is the answer, together with investing in a life of dignity for everyone.
Can you actually talk briefly about the war on drugs? Because it's called the war on drugs, but it seems like the big drug lords are not affected at all but this war on drugs, right?
Yes, actually, based on the patterns that we've seen since his assumption into office, um, the drug war or operations of the police and vigilantes seem to be confined in the most impoverished urban poor communities in the Philippines. Um, Essentially, there's a double standard in implementation. When it comes to private subdivisions, they undertake leafleting, no, and information campaigns against illegal drugs. But when it comes to the most impoverished urban poor communities, uh, they simply undertake violent and hardline operations, kicking down doors and yeah, um, uh, and shooting people directly without arresting them. So this has been the pattern for since June last year. So essentially, it's sad that instead of um, providing the most basic services and access to opportunities to those most neglected And the most forgotten during the past administrations, this president chooses to assault the most brutalized people in Philippine society.
So you've spoken about the propaganda of the government, the fact that he's got the media on its side, the somehow support he enjoys,
Oh.
and I wanted to ask you how the alliance among movements is developing its strategies to address this in the Philippines.
Yeah. Well, just a correction. Actually, uh, he is making use of government's news and information agencies. In the Philippines, we still enjoy a strong independent media. Actually, the courageous ones, journalists and reporters, actually, the night shifts, as we refer to them, actually still courageously documenting um, the killings, no? And also providing the independent figures as compared to the figures that the skewed figures now that the police is putting forward. Um, yeah, but essentially, this these government news agencies, uh, together with the other sections of this propaganda arm, have actually mastered the art of yeah, shaping public opinion and manipulating the truth, spreading fake news, lies, and half truths. No, so yeah, it's actually an information war. No, a war of narratives and really uh, various independent and genuine news agencies trying to counter the narrative and the framing of being put forward by Duterte's propaganda arm. But now referring to the social movements here in the Philippines, it is only now that the process of unification has effectively begun. No, um, in the past months, um, uh, there was quite a disappointing period of yeah us having a disunited social movement. No, the left, for example, um, being disorganized. No, some progressives here in the Philippines actually continue to lend legitimacy to this violent president. Unfortunately, and so it's a matter of, I would categorize progressives here in the Philippines as one, those who are still um, engaging, no, the Duterte administration, and there's another section that is already um, working towards defending, opposing, and resisting this regime, no, and its violent policies. But even before Duterte, the problem is really that the left is quite disunited, no. In the early 90s, um, the Philippine left began to break up. So you have various splinters, and it's now actually a necessary but difficult task of the broader left to actually unite and provide that critical opposition effectively uh, to the rise of tyranny and the relapse into dictatorship.
Thanks. Finally, I wanted to ask you, What about the role of international solidarity? What should be outside of the Philippines our role in supporting you guys?
Well, yeah, given the shrinking space in the Philippines, it's becoming more difficult for us to actually operate and actually express dissent, no? And more and more, it has become crucial to actually revive what once was a strong solidarity movement for the Philippines. You see, uh, more and more have come to see that this Duterte juncture is not actually a separate episode um, in Philippine history with the Marcos dictatorship. This is actually a relapse or a resurgence of what we failed to quell in 1986. No, in 1986, what appeared to have been a people's revolution um, was actually a bourgeois. Um, was actually a revolution that was hijacked um, by the elite. No, and thus uh, another elite actually took the place of Marcos and his cronies. And we were never able to overturn an oppressive and exploitative setup. Um, so we started to, of course, regain our some democratic space. Uh, but yeah, we were actually never able to hold the perpetrators of the Marcos dictatorship to account. Um, actually, uh, the first president after Marcos, the late President Corazon Aquino, um, Noynoy Aquino's mother, no, um, her her tact was actually peace and reconciliation, and so yeah, we were never able to go through what is referred to as transitional justice and actually institute a truth commission to actually institutionalize what really happened during the Marcos dictatorship. And so, yeah, this enabled the Marcoses to actually uh, stage a well orchestrated political resurgence. No? And so, yeah, the Marcoses actually are one of the among the main funders of President Duterte. And President Duterte actually, yeah, is supporting uh, the vice possible vice presidency of the son of the late dictator, no? So Bongbong Marcos, and so we should all see this Duterte juncture as a sort of continuation of the Marcos dictatorship, no? A revival of the Marcos dictatorship. And in many respects, what Duterte is doing now is quite similar to what Marcos did. And yeah, essentially, so yeah, so activists of the past, those who were members of the Solidarity Network during the time of the Marcos dictatorship, should actually pursue what they started, no? And yeah, it's international solidarity work is important, and yeah, not just in bringing out the truth on what is happening in the Philippines, uh, but also to help strengthen Filipino organizations countering the nascent dictatorship here in the Philippines, as well as addressing the human rights crisis, which is being used as a tool to advance authoritarian rule.
Thanks, thanks a lot, Budit. Yeah, thanks again for doing this.
Yes, very much welcome, Frank. Yes, thank you so much also for having me.